My name is Harrison Caldwell, and at 70 years old, I possess a net worth of $400 million. Yet as I stand here in the pouring rain outside the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago, I do not even have a coat to keep me warm. Inside that ballroom, under the crystal chandeliers, I paid for my wife just handed me divorce papers instead of a toast. My son, the boy I carried on my shoulders, told security to throw me out. They think I am a senile old man. They think they have stripped me of my dignity and my company. They are celebrating right now, drinking my 50-year-old scotch, believing the old lion has lost his teeth. But they forgot one thing. I did not inherit this empire. I built it with blood and iron. And before this night is over, I will show them that the only thing more dangerous than a man with nothing to lose is a man who knows exactly how to take everything back. Before I tell you how I made them beg on their knees, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever sacrificed your life for family only to be betrayed when you needed them most? If you believe loyalty is dead like this video. Now listen closely, because this is how my life ended and my revenge began. It was supposed to be the crowning achievement of my life. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was suffocatingly beautiful that night. The air smelled of expensive perfume prime rib and the specific kind of arrogance that only money can buy. I stood near the podium, adjusting my silk tie, feeling the weight of 40 years of Caldwell logistics on my shoulders. I looked out at the sea of faces. 500 guests. Partners, competitors, politicians, and my family. My wife Patricia sat at the center table. At 62, she was still a striking woman, wearing a red velvet gown that I had bought her in Paris. She was smiling, but her eyes were cold, scanning the room, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Next to her was Preston, my 40-year-old son. He was checking his watch, probably bored, probably anxious to get back to his online gambling or whatever latest scheme he was hiding from me. And Madison, my daughter, was busy taking selfies, pouting her lips at her phone screen, ignoring the father who paid for the plastic surgery that perfected that pout. I felt a pang of sadness, a familiar ache in my chest. I had given them everything. Private schools, trust funds, cars, houses. I had worked 18-hour days building a trucking empire from a single rusted van in the South Side just so they would never know the hunger I knew. But somewhere along the way, I had created monsters. I pushed the thought away. Tonight was about legacy. The master of ceremonies announced my name. The applause was polite, respectful. I walked to the microphone, my hands shaking slightly. Not from age, but from emotion, I cleared my throat. Thank you all for coming. I began, my voice echoing through the silent hall. 40 years ago, I had a dream and a full tank of gas. Today, we move the world. But a man does not build a legacy alone. I looked at my family. I want to thank my wife, Patricia. Without her support. Suddenly, the sound of feedback screeched through the speakers. I flinched. Patricia was standing up. She wasn't smiling anymore. She walked up the stairs to the stage, her heels clicking like gunshots on the wooden floor. She didn't come to hug me. She walked past me and snatched the microphone from my hand. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. I am sorry to interrupt. Patricia said, her voice smooth, practiced fake. But we cannot let this charade continue. I looked at her confused. Patty, what are you doing? I whispered. She ignored me. She turned to the crowd, her face twisting into a mask of mock sorrow. My husband Harrison is not well. We have tried to keep it private to protect his dignity, but his mental state has deteriorated rapidly. He is no longer the man you knew. A murmur rippled through the crowd. What was she talking about? I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. Look, she said, gesturing to the giant projection screen behind me. A video started playing. It was me, but it was edited, chopped up. It showed me forgetting a name at a meeting. It showed me stumbling on a step. It showed me yelling at a waiter in frustration. But the audio was manipulated, the context removed. It made me look confused, angry, and undeniably senile. It made me look like I had dementia. The crowd gasped. I saw pity in their eyes. Pity and horror. "That is a lie," I shouted, reaching for the mic, but Preston had jumped onto the stage. He blocked my path, his chest puffed out. "Sit down, Dad," Preston said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Stop embarrassing yourself. You are having an episode." Then Patricia did the unthinkable. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a thick blue folder. She slammed it onto the podium. "Harrison, for your own good and for the safety of the company, I am filing for divorce and petitioning for full conservatorship. I am taking control. It is over." I stood there frozen. The betrayal went deeper than a knife. It was surgical. They had planned this. The video, the stage, the audience. They wanted to humiliate me publicly so no one would question them when they took my company. I looked at Madison at the front table. She wasn't crying. She was clapping. Slowly at first, then louder. Preston joined in, then Patricia. And then the shareholders, the people I had made rich, began to clap too. They were applauding my destruction. I looked at Patricia. Really looked at her. I didn't see the woman I married 40 years ago. I saw a stranger. A greedy, heartless stranger. Something inside me snapped. But it wasn't a snap of rage. It was a snap of clarity. The fog of love and duty that had blinded me for decades vanished. I saw them for what they were. Vultures. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't try to explain that the video was a fake. I knew it wouldn't matter. They had won the crowd. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my fountain pen. It was heavy gold-plated, a gift from my first employees. I opened the blue folder. The divorce papers were on top. The terms were brutal. She wanted everything. I looked Patricia in the eye. The room was quiet again, waiting for the crazy old man to explode. I uncapped the pen. I signed the paper. My signature was firm, sharp, unwavering. I closed the folder and slid it back to her. She looked surprised. She expected a fight. She expected me to beg. I leaned in close to her ear so only she could hear. My voice was a low growl, steady and dangerous. "You think you just won the lottery, Patty. But you didn't read the fine print. You just signed your death warrant." She pulled back, a flicker of fear crossing her face, but she quickly covered it with a smirk. "Security," she yelled. "Please escort Mr. Caldwell out. He is becoming agitated." 2 large men stepped forward. I recognized them. Jerry and Mike, men I had hired, men whose families I had supported. "Mr. Caldwell," Jerry said, looking down at his shoes. "I am sorry, sir. Please, don't make us force you." I looked at Preston. He was waving goodbye, a cruel grin on his face. "Goodbye, Dad. Don't worry, we will pick out a nice nursing home, one with a view." I straightened my jacket. I did not let them touch me. I walked down the stairs through the parting crowd. No one looked me in the eye. I was a ghost walking through a graveyard of my own making. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the hotel and stepped out. The Chicago wind hit me like a hammer. It was raining hard. Cold, biting rain that soaked through my tuxedo in seconds. The valet looked at me confused. "Mr. Caldwell, your car, no," I said. "My son has canceled the account." I stood on the sidewalk as the rain ran down my face, mixing with the tears I refused to shed. Through the glass windows of the ballroom, I could see them. They were popping champagne. Preston was high-fiving the board members. Patricia was holding court, the queen of a stolen kingdom. They were celebrating my death. I turned away from the light and looked toward the darkness of the street. I had no phone, no credit cards, no car. But as I walked into the night, leaving the warmth of my past life behind, I felt something strange. I didn't feel fear. I felt liberated. I reached into my inner pocket. I still had one thing, a small old brass key, the key to a warehouse in the South Side that I hadn't visited in 20 years. They thought they took my power because they took my title. They forgot that I was a street fighter long before I was a CEO. I pulled my collar up against the wind and started walking. It was a 10-mile walk to the South Side. I had done it before 40 years ago. I could do it again. Preston said he would send me to a nursing home. Patricia said I was sick. I smiled into the darkness, a smile that would have terrified them if they could see it. Let it rain. It will wash away the weakness. By Monday morning, they will realize that they didn't lock the lion in a cage. They just locked themselves in the cage with the lion. And I was hungry. The rain in Chicago is merciless in November. It does not just wet you, it seeks out your bones. I stood on the curb, water dripping from the end of my nose, shivering in a tuxedo that cost more than my father made in a year. I reached for my wallet with numb fingers. I needed a taxi. I needed a hotel. I needed a drink. I pulled out my black Centurion card, the heavy titanium rectangle that had opened doors for me all over the world. I walked to the ATM in the hotel lobby vestibule, avoiding the gaze of the security guards who had just thrown me out. I inserted the card. Access denied. Contact issuer. I tried the platinum card. Declined. I tried the debit card for my personal expense account. Account frozen. I stared at the glowing blue screen. Preston. He had not waited until Monday. He must have had someone at the bank on speed dial ready to pull the trigger from the moment Patricia made her scene. They had stripped me naked financially in less than 10 minutes. I turned back to the street. My personal limousine was still idling at the curb. I saw Charles, my driver, for 15 years. I had paid for his daughter's braces. I had sent flowers to his wife's funeral. I walked over and tapped on the glass. Charles I, said, my voice cracking slightly. I need a ride. Just take me to the old office. The window rolled down 2 inches. Charles did not look at me. He looked straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. I can't, Mr. Caldwell, he whispered. Mr. Preston called. He said the car is company property. He said if I let you in, I'm fired. I have 2 kids in college, sir. I'm sorry. The window rolled up. The locks clicked. I stood there as the long black car pulled away, splashing dirty water onto my trousers. That hurt more than the frozen bank accounts. Money is just paper. Loyalty is currency. And I was bankrupt. I had no phone. Patricia had kept it when she grabbed the microphone. I had no cash. I had no ride. I looked south. The wind was howling from the lake. The South Side was 10 miles away. It was a war zone compared to the Gold Coast, but it was the only place I had left. I started walking. The first mile was anger. The second mile was denial. By the 5th mile, the physical pain set in. My leather dress shoes were not made for concrete. Blisters formed and burst. My knees, filled with arthritis, screamed with every step. I walked past the gleaming towers of the Loop, past the trendy restaurants where I used to dine, and into the dark, quiet streets of the industrial district. The scenery changed. Luxury condos turned into abandoned factories. The smell of expensive perfume was replaced by the scent of wet asphalt and diesel fumes. This was my world. This was where I started. It took me 4 hours. By the time I reached the old brick warehouse on 35th Street, I was limping. I was soaked to the skin. I looked like a vagrant. If a police officer had seen me, he would have arrested me for loitering at my own building. I stood before the rusted steel door. The sign above it was faded, barely readable, Caldwell Transport. No logistics, just transport. This was the first garage. the place where I slept in the cab of my first truck because I couldn't afford an apartment. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key. I prayed the lock hadn't seized up with rust. I slid the key in. It resisted. I gritted my teeth and twisted. With a groan of metal on metal, the bolt slid back. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was stale thick with dust and the ghost of old engine oil. It was pitch black. I fumbled along the wall until I found the breaker box. I flipped the main switch. One by one, the overhead fluorescent lights flickered on, buzzing like angry hornets. The warehouse was empty save for a few pallets and a tarp-covered shape in the corner. My old desk. I walked over to the corner office, a glass-walled box raised on a platform. I climbed the stairs, leaving wet footprints on the metal grating. Inside the office was exactly as I had left it 20 years ago. The cheap wooden desk, the filing cabinets, the lumpy sofa where I used to crash after a 40-hour run. I collapsed onto the sofa. My body was screaming for rest, but my mind was racing. I was not done. I was not senile, and I was not going to let them win. I sat up and pulled the tarp off the desk. Underneath was not just old paperwork. There was a computer tower. It looked old, but the casing was modified. 3 years ago, when I first sensed Preston was getting greedy, I had come here. I had installed a private server, a back door. I powered up the system. The fans whirred to life, blowing a cloud of dust into the air. The monitor glowed green. I typed in the password. A string of numbers that was the birthday of my first dog. No one knew it. Welcome, admin. I navigated to the program I called the Shadow System. Patricia thought she was smart. She had hired a top-tier security firm to install cameras in every room of our Lake Forest mansion. She wanted to watch the maids. She wanted to watch the gardeners. What she didn't know was that I owned the security firm through a shell company. Every camera feed in that house came here, to this dusty warehouse in the slums. I clicked on the live feed. The screen filled with a grid of images. The living room, the kitchen, the library. I clicked on the library. The image expanded. The quality was crystal clear 4K resolution. There they were. Patricia was sitting in my leather armchair, her shoes kicked off. Preston was leaning against the fireplace. Madison was sitting on the desk, my desk swinging her legs. They were laughing. On the table between them sat a bottle of wine. I squinted at the screen. It was the 1982 Chateau Margaux, the bottle I had been saving for my 50th wedding anniversary. They had popped the cork like it was cheap soda. I turned up the volume on the speakers. Their voices filled the empty warehouse. "Did you see his face?" Madison giggled, taking a swig directly from the crystal glass. He looked like a wet rat. God, that was embarrassing. I can't believe I share DNA with him. He is gone, Maddie, Patricia said, swirling the wine in her glass. Don't worry about him. The lawyers said the restraining order will be served tomorrow morning. If he comes within 500 feet of the house, he goes to jail. Preston laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. Jail is too good for him. He needs a padded room. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding against my ribs. What time is the meeting on Monday? Patricia asked. Preston checked his phone. 10 a.m. sharp. The guys from BlackRock are flying in. They are eager, Mom. They want the logistics network. They don't care about the brand. They are going to strip it for parts. My blood ran cold. Sell to BlackRock. Strip it for parts. Caldwell Logistics employed 4,000 people. If they sold to a private equity firm, half those people would be fired within a month. The pension fund would be gutted. My legacy, my life's work would be erased. And the price? Patricia asked. Preston grinned. 200 million. Cash. We sign, we take the money, and we disappear to the Caymans before the audit team realizes the trucks haven't been maintained in 6 months. I clenched my fists so hard my fingernails bit into my palms. He wasn't just selling the company, he was selling a hollow shell. He had been neglecting the fleet. That was fraud. But what about your father? Patricia asked, a hint of worry in her voice. If he contests the sale, Preston waved his hand dismissively. That is the best part. I have already spoken to Dr. Evans. With the video from tonight and the testimony from the board, we have enough to invoke the incompetence clause. Once the papers are signed on Monday, we file the medical commit. We throw the old man in the state mental facility in Joliet. By the time he proves he is sane, we will be on a beach in different time zones. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. They didn't just want to divorce me. They didn't just want the money. They were planning to lock me away in a madhouse to keep me quiet. They were going to bury me alive. I stared at Preston's face on the screen. My son. The boy I taught to fish. The boy I stayed up with when he had the flu. He was planning to sell me out for a plane ticket to the Caribbean. A cold calm washed over me. The shivering stopped. The pain in my knees faded. I looked around the dusty office. This was where I built the first million. This was where I learned that in the trucking business, you don't back down when someone cuts you off. You accelerate. I wasn't fighting for a marriage anymore. That was dead. I wasn't fighting for half my assets. They could burn the money for all I cared. I was fighting for my name. I was fighting for the 4,000 families that relied on my paycheck. I looked at the time on the computer. It was 3:00 a.m. on Saturday. The meeting was Monday at 10:00 a.m. I had 55 hours. 55 hours to stop a $200 million deal. 55 hours to prove I wasn't crazy. 55 hours to take down my own family before they erased me from existence. I reached for the keyboard. My fingers hovered over the keys. You want a war, Preston? I whispered to the empty room. You just got one. I opened a new window. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. I needed a lawyer who was as ruthless as they were and crazy enough to take a case from a dead man. I typed in a name. Rick Moretti. He was the only man in Chicago who hated Preston as much as I did right now. I picked up the landline phone on the desk. It was dusty, but when I lifted the receiver, I heard the hum of a dial tone. It was the only line they hadn't cut, because they forgot it existed. I dialed. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello, a groggy voice answered. Rick, I said. Don't hang up. Harrison. You sound like you're calling from the grave. I saw the news. They said you lost it. I didn't lose it, Rick. I found it. Meet me at the old warehouse on 35th. Bring coffee. And bring your forensic kit. We have a company to steal back. The headlights of a silver Mercedes cut through the darkness of the warehouse district, like a lighthouse beam in a storm. I watched from the 2nd floor window as the car splashed through the puddles and came to a stop in front of the rusted steel bay door. It was 2:15 in the morning. Rick Moretti was 15 minutes late, but considering I had just asked him to drive into the worst part of Chicago, in the middle of a torrential downpour, to meet a man the rest of the world thought was insane, I decided not to hold it against him. I went down to let him in. Rick was a small man, sharp as a tack, with a suit that always looked fresh from the dry cleaner, even at this ungodly hour. He was carrying a leather briefcase in one hand and a cardboard carrier with 2 large coffees in the other. He looked at me soaking wet and shivering in my tuxedo, and he didn't say a word. He just handed me a coffee. We walked up the metal stairs to the office in silence. The warmth of the cup seeped into my frozen hands, bringing a small amount of life back into my body. When we got to the desk, Rick set his briefcase down and opened it. He pulled out a thick stack of papers and laid them out on the dusty surface. It is worse than we thought, Harrison. Rick said, his voice grave. I just came from the courthouse. I have a friend in the clerk's office who owes me a favor. He let me see the filing before it goes public on Monday. I took a sip of the black coffee. Give it to me straight, Rick. They didn't just file for divorce. They filed an emergency ex parte motion for guardianship. They have an affidavit from a Dr. Jonathan Evans stating that you are suffering from advanced rapid onset dementia with paranoid delusions. I slammed the coffee cup down. Evans, I haven't seen that quack in 5 years. He treats Patricia for her migraines. He has never evaluated me. Rick nodded. I know that. You know that. But the judge doesn't know that. The video from the gala was the smoking gun. Based on that performance and the doctor's note, the judge signed a temporary freeze on all your personal assets. Your bank accounts, your stock portfolio, your real estate. It is all locked down until a competency hearing can be held. You can't spend a dime, Harrison. Legally, you don't even have the authority to hire me right now. I looked at the papers. It was a masterful setup. They had tied my hands so tight, I couldn't even make a fist to fight back. So I'm dead in the water, I said quietly. Rick loosened his tie. Not yet. The hearing is set for next Friday. But that is not the real problem. The real problem is the sale. As your temporary guardian, Patricia has the authority to make business decisions to preserve the value of the estate. She is going to sign the deal with BlackRock on Monday morning. Once that ink is dry, the company is gone. They will dismantle Caldwell Logistics before you even step foot in a courtroom. I looked at the glowing green monitor of my old computer. The live feed from the house showed the library was empty now. They had gone to sleep dreaming of their millions. Rick, come look at this, I said, pointing to the screen. Rick walked around the desk. I had the company's internal server open. I have been going through the maintenance logs and the revenue projections for the last 2 quarters, I explained. Look at these numbers. Rick squinted at the spreadsheet. Revenue is up 40%. That is incredible growth. I shook my head. It is impossible growth. Look at the fleet maintenance costs. They are down 60%. Rick, a truck doesn't run on hopes and dreams. If you stop maintaining the engines, you save money in the short term, but the fleet is a ticking time bomb. Preston stopped changing the oil. He stopped replacing the tires. He cut every corner to make the profit margins look fatter. I clicked to another file. And look here. These contracts with Midwest Retail and Omnicorp, they are listed as signed and active, projecting $10 million a month in revenue. Rick adjusted his glasses. So I played golf with the CEO of Omni last week. He told me they were cutting back on shipping. They didn't sign a new contract. These contracts are fake, Rick. Preston drafted them to pump up the valuation. He is selling BlackRock, a company that is about to have a massive mechanical failure based on revenue that doesn't exist. Rick let out a low whistle. That is securities fraud. That is bank fraud. If BlackRock finds out, they will sue everyone into oblivion. Preston is going to prison. I looked at Rick. And if the sale goes through, I go down with him. I am still the chairman. They will say I authorized it. Rick paced the small office. Okay, so we have evidence of fraud. We can take this to the SEC. We can call the FBI. No, I said sharply. If we call the feds, they freeze the company assets. The investigation takes years. The stock tanks. The employees lose their jobs. The company dies anyway. I built this place to last, Rick. I am not going to let the government auction off my trucks to pay legal fees. Then what do we do? Rick asked, throwing his hands up. We can't stop the sale because you are legally incompetent. We can't call the police because it destroys the company. We are trapped. I sat back in the creaking leather chair. I closed my eyes. I thought back to the beginning, to 1990, the year the company finally went public. I was terrified that day, terrified that the investors would ruin what I had built. I had a lawyer back then, Old Man Solomon. He was a shark. He wrote something into the corporate bylaws, a poison pill that nobody ever reads because nobody thinks it will ever happen. I stood up and walked to the wall behind the desk. There was a loose brick near the floor. I pried it open with my fingernails. Behind it was a small wall safe. I spun the dial, left to 30, right to 10, left to 4. The heavy door swung open. Inside there was no money, just a single yellowed envelope sealed with wax. I pulled it out and blew the dust off the cover. "What is that?" Rick asked. "This," I said, slicing the envelope open with a letter opener, "is the Founder's Covenant." I pulled out the document. The paper was thick, high quality. I laid it on the desk and pointed to Article 7, Section C. "Read it," I commanded. Rick leaned in and read aloud. "In the event of a proposed sale or merger, should any material financial data be found to be fraudulently altered or misrepresented by any executive officer or family member acting as a proxy, all voting rights and equity ownership shall immediately and irrevocably revert to the founding chairman, regardless of current employment status, marital status, or temporary incapacity, for the sole purpose of preserving the integrity of the corporation." Rick looked up at me, his eyes wide. "My God. It overrides the guardianship. It overrides the divorce. If you can prove fraud, the company snaps back to you instantly to protect itself." "Exactly," I said. "It was designed to stop a hostile takeover from within." "But there is a catch." "What catch? To trigger this clause, I need irrefutable proof. The digital files on this server are a good start, but any good lawyer could argue they were hacked or manipulated. I need the source. I need the original, unalterable ledger. Preston is stupid, but he is paranoid. He keeps a physical record of his real numbers, a black book. He calls it his insurance policy. If I can get that book or the raw data file he keeps on an encrypted drive that isn't connected to the network, I can walk into that board meeting on Monday and drop a nuclear bomb." Rick looked at the clock. It was now 4 in the morning. "We have 48 hours. The book is likely in the mansion, in the safe. The same mansion you are legally barred from entering. If you step foot on the property, the police will arrest you and Preston will win by default." I walked to the window and looked out at the rain. "I can't go in, but someone else can." "Who?" Rick asked. "All the staff are loyal to the paycheck Preston is signing." I turned back to him. "Not the staff, family." Rick looked confused. "Patricia is the mastermind. Preston is the fraudster." "Who is left, Madison?" I said. "Your daughter," Rick scoffed. "She cheered when they kicked you out. She is just as bad as them." "She is greedy," I corrected. "And she is weak. Preston is the golden boy. Patricia is the queen. Madison has always been the afterthought. She spends money she doesn't have to fill a void they created. She is drowning in credit card debt. I saw her bill last month. She owes $200,000 to Amex." I walked back to the computer and pulled up the internal camera feed again. I rewound the footage to an hour ago. I watched Madison sitting on the desk. When Preston wasn't looking, I saw her slip a silver paperweight into her purse. She was stealing from her own house. "She is desperate," I said. "And desperate people make mistakes. We don't need to break in, Rick. We need to be invited. We need a Trojan horse." I picked up a prepaid burner phone Rick had bought on his way over. "What are you going to do?" Rick asked. "I am going to make her an offer she can't refuse," I said, my thumb hovering over the dial pad. "But first, I need you to draft a fake will. A fake will." "Yes. Make it look official. Make it look like I have a secret account with $50 million in cash that I hid from the divorce lawyers. And make it look like I am looking for a beneficiary." Rick smiled. A slow, sharp smile. "You are going to bait the trap." I dialed Madison's number. It went to voicemail. "Hey, princess," I said into the phone, my voice trembling with a fake senile weakness. "It is Dad. I know you hate me. That is fine. I am at the old warehouse. I don't have much time left. My mind is going. But before I forget everything, I need to give someone the combination to the safe in the old library. The one with the 50 million. I can't let your mother have it. Come alone, Madison. Come alone and it is yours. I hung up and looked at Rick. Now we wait. The sun was just beginning to bruise the horizon with a dull gray light when I saw her car pull up. It was a red Porsche Cayenne, a birthday gift I had bought her 2 years ago because she said the Range Rover was too big. From the grimy window of the warehouse office, I watched my daughter Madison step out into the mud. She looked like a porcelain doll dropped into a mechanic's garage. She was wearing a beige trench coat that probably cost more than this entire building, and she was holding a paper bag from a 24-hour diner. I turned to Rick. "Hide," I whispered. "Go into the back storage room. If she sees you, she will know I am lucid. She needs to see a broken old man." Rick nodded and gathered his papers, disappearing into the shadows, just as the heavy steel door creaked open. I sat in the leather chair, slumping my shoulders forward. I messed up my hair, pulling a few strands loose to look disheveled. I let my hand tremble on the desk. I was not Harrison Caldwell, the tycoon, anymore. I was the confused, defeated geriatric they claimed I was. "Daddy?" Her voice echoed through the empty space. It was high, shaky, filled with a performance of concern. "I am up here, Madison," I called out, making my voice sound thin and brittle. She climbed the metal stairs, the heels of her boots clanging loudly. When she entered the office, she stopped. She looked at the dust, the peeling paint, and then at me. Her eyes welled up with tears instantly. It was a good performance. If I hadn't raised her, I might have believed it. "Oh, Daddy," she sobbed, rushing over to hug me. "Look at you. You are freezing. Why did you come to this awful place?" She wrapped her arms around me. I smelled her expensive shampoo and the faint, stale odor of cigarettes. I wanted to hug her back. I wanted to believe that my little girl had broken free from her mother's claws and come to save me. But then I felt it. Her body was stiff. She wasn't holding me like a daughter who missed her father. She was holding me like someone trying to restrain a wild animal. She pulled back and wiped her eyes. "I brought you some soup and a sandwich," she said, placing the bag on the desk. "I am so sorry about last night. Mom and Preston. They made me do it. They said if I didn't clap, they would cut off my allowance. They said they would take my apartment. I was so scared, Daddy." I looked at her face. She was crying, but her eyes were dry. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the walls, at the floor, anywhere but my eyes. "It is okay, Maddie," I said, reaching out to pat her hand. My hand shook intentionally. "I know you are a good girl. I know you love your old dad." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course I do. That is why I am here. I want to help you. We need to get you to a doctor, Daddy. You are not well. You were talking nonsense at the party." I leaned back, letting out a long, wheezing sigh. "Maybe you are right," I muttered. "My head. It feels like a fog. I can't remember what day it is. Is it Sunday?" "It is Saturday morning, Daddy," she corrected me gently, like one speaks to a child. She sat down on the edge of the desk, crossing her legs. As she moved, she reached up and adjusted a large silver brooch on the lapel of her coat. It was shaped like a dragonfly with ruby eyes. I had never seen it before. Madison hated vintage jewelry. She liked modern, flashy diamonds. "That is a pretty pin," I said, pointing a shaking finger at it. She flinched, her hand covering the brooch protectively. "Oh, it is just costume jewelry. I found it in a thrift store." She was lying. I could tell by the way her pulse jumped in her neck. I looked closer. The dragonfly's head was slightly bulky. The mesh in the center wasn't decorative. It was a microphone grill. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She wasn't here to feed me. She was wearing a wire. Patricia and Preston were likely listening in a van down the street, or maybe recording it to play for the judge. They wanted me to admit I was crazy. They wanted me to threaten them so they could get a restraining order. My own daughter was a spy. The pain was worse than the cold rain. But I swallowed it. I pushed it down deep where I kept all my other scars. If they wanted a show, I would give them a blockbuster. I am just so tired, Maddie, I whispered, staring past her at the blank wall. I don't care about the company anymore. Preston can have it. Patricia can have the house. I just want to rest. Madison leaned in the dragonfly brooch, tilting toward me. That is good, Daddy. You should rest. Just sign the papers and we can take care of everything. You won't have to worry about money or trucks ever again. Money. I chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. They think they found all the money. They froze the accounts. But they don't know about the box. Madison froze. Her hand stopped midway to the sandwich bag. What box? I leaned forward, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I looked around the empty room as if I was afraid of ghosts. The contingency fund, I said. Back in '95, when the unions were threatening to strike, I got scared. I started skimming cash. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. I didn't trust the banks. I didn't trust your mother. Madison's eyes widened. The greed was cutting through her act. How much, Daddy? 50 million, I lied. $50 million in bearer bonds and diamonds. Untraceable. I hid it. I was saving it for a rainy day. Well, look at me. It is raining. I saw her swallow hard. $50 million was enough to pay off her debts 10 times over. It was enough to buy her freedom from Patricia. Where is it? She asked, her voice tight. Is it here? No, I shook my head, tapping my temple. Too dangerous here. I put it in the safest place I know. The old library in the mansion. The library. But we looked. Mom looked everywhere. There is no safe in the library. I smiled, a crooked, senile smile. Not behind the paintings. Everyone looks behind the paintings. It is in the wall. Behind the bookshelf. Section H through J. You have to pull the copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. The blue leather one. It triggers the mechanism. I saw her memorize the details. Section H through J. Count of Monte Cristo. Blue leather. I grabbed her hand, squeezing it tight. Maddie, you have to promise me. Don't tell your mother. She will take it all. She is wicked. That money is for you and Preston. But mostly for you. You were always my favorite. I am, aren't I? She said, and for a second she actually sounded sincere, but then she pulled her hand away. I have to go, Daddy, she said, standing up abruptly. You just got here, I whined. Stay and eat with me. I am lonely. I can't. I have to go check on my dog. He is sick. But I will come back. I promise. You stay here, okay? Don't go anywhere. She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed her purse and practically ran down the stairs. She didn't look back. She didn't say, I love you. She was already spending the 50 million in her head. I listened to her footsteps fade. I heard the heavy door slam shut. I heard the Porsche engine roar to life and peel away, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. She was driving fast. She was rushing home to tell her mother and brother. They wouldn't be able to help themselves. Greed is a powerful drug, and I had just given them an overdose. I sat there for a moment in the silence. The act dropped from my shoulders like a heavy coat. I straightened my back. My hands stopped shaking. You can come out now, Rick, I said, my voice steady and cold. Rick stepped out of the shadows. He looked pale. That was hard to watch, Harrison. She is gone, Rick, I said, staring at the empty sandwich bag she left behind. My daughter is gone. The girl who used to sit on my lap and ask for pony rides is dead. That woman who just left, she is just another enemy combatant. I turned back to the computer screen. I pulled up the camera feed for the library. Get the popcorn. Rick, I said, leaning in. The rats are about to run the maze. We have maybe 20 minutes before they get there. Did you get the virus ready? Rick nodded, pulling a small black USB drive from his pocket. It is ready. But how are we going to get it into their system? You said Madison was the Trojan horse, but she didn't take anything with her except the information. I pointed to the screen. Madison didn't take anything, but she left something behind. I reached into the paper bag she had brought. Underneath the wrapped sandwich, there was a small white portable battery charger. A power bank. She must have dropped it in her haste, or maybe she left it thinking I might need to charge a phone I didn't have. No, wait, I realized. She didn't leave it. She forgot it. She had her phone plugged into it when she walked in. I looked at Rick. Change of plans. We don't need to infect their system physically. We are going to do it the way they tried to do it to me. We are going to use their own arrogance against them. But first, I need to see them break that wall. I need to see them destroy the very house they are trying to steal. I watched the screen. The library was quiet, the calm before the storm. They are coming, I whispered, and they are bringing a sledgehammer. I felt a tear finally escape my eye. It wasn't for the money. It wasn't for the house. It was for the memory of a family that never really existed. I wiped it away angrily. Focus, Harrison. This is business. Scene 4 was over. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the snap. The screen flickered with the grainy high-definition feed of the library. Rick and I sat in the darkness of the warehouse, illuminated only by the cold glow of the monitor. We were like snipers waiting for the target to walk into the crosshairs. It did not take long. The double doors of the library flew open, banging against the mahogany paneling I had imported from Italy 30 years ago. Patricia led the charge. She was still wearing her evening gown, but she had kicked off her heels. Her eyes were wide, manic, filled with a hunger that made her look 10 years older. Preston followed close behind, holding a heavy sledgehammer he must have dragged up from the garage. And trailing them was Madison, looking breathless and triumphant. Are you sure, Madison? Patricia snapped, her voice shrill through the speakers. Are you absolutely sure He said behind the blue book. Madison nodded vigorously, throwing her purse onto the large oak table where Preston had his laptop open. Yes, Mom. I told you. He was lucid for a second. He grabbed my hand. He said $50 million in cash and diamonds. He said he didn't trust the banks. Preston laughed, swinging the hammer casually. I knew the old man was holding out. 50 million. That covers everything. That covers the debts, the lifestyle, everything. He walked over to the bookshelf. Section H through J. He ran his finger along the spines of the books. I watched him touch the first editions of Hemingway, the leather-bound Dickens. He didn't care about the literature. He didn't care about the history. He just wanted the payout. Found it, Preston yelled. The Count of Monte Cristo, blue leather. He pulled the book off the shelf. Nothing happened. No secret door opened. No safe was revealed. It is a mechanism, Madison said, stepping forward. He said you have to trigger the mechanism. Maybe it is stuck. Preston didn't have the patience for puzzles. He stepped back, gripped the sledgehammer with both hands, and swung. Crack! The sound of wood splintering was deafening even through the speakers. The beautiful mahogany shelf carved by master craftsmen shattered. Books flew into the air, their pages fluttering like wounded birds. I flinched. That library was my sanctuary. It was where I read bedtime stories to them. Now they were tearing it apart like wild animals. Keep going, Patricia screamed. Break it down. The safe is in the wall. Preston swung again and again. Dust and plaster filled the air. They were in a frenzy. The greed had taken over their motor functions. They weren't thinking. They were just consuming. While they destroyed my physical legacy, I watched Madison. She was standing by the table, coughing in the dust. She pulled out her phone. It was dead. She looked around for a charger. She rummaged through her purse, the same purse I had slipped the small black USB drive into, while she was distracted by my fake senility act. It wasn't just a drive. It was a pass-through charging adapter. She pulled it out, thinking it was just a piece of tech she owned. She looked at the wall outlets. They were blocked by debris. She looked at Preston's laptop sitting open and running on the table. "Perfect," I whispered. "Plug it in, Maddie." She plugged the USB adapter into the side of Preston's laptop, then plugged her phone charging cable into the adapter. A chime sounded on the computer in the warehouse. Target acquired. Rick set his fingers flying across his keyboard. "We have a connection. The Trojan is executing." I watched the screen. In the library, Preston was sweating, his tuxedo shirt stained with drywall dust. He had smashed a hole the size of a car door in the wall. There was nothing behind it but insulation and studs. "Where is it?" Preston roared, turning to Madison. "You said it was here." "It has to be," Madison cried. He said behind the book. "Maybe it is lower, maybe it is in the floor. Keep digging," Patricia commanded. "Tear this whole room apart if you have to." While they argued and smashed, the real heist was happening silently on the table. The progress bar on my screen turned from red to yellow. "Bypassing firewalls," Rick muttered. "Decrypting admin passwords. God, his security is a joke. His password is literally money123. We were draining Preston's digital life. Emails, bank records, chat logs, hidden folders. It was all flowing through that little black USB drive, traveling 10 miles across the city and landing right in my lap. 50% complete, Rick said. On the screen, Preston had stopped swinging. He was breathing hard. He kicked a pile of broken wood. "There is nothing here, Madison. The old man played you." "He didn't." Madison screamed back. "He is senile. He doesn't have the brain capacity to lie like that. We just haven't found the right spot." Patricia grabbed a metal fireplace poker and started stabbing the wall herself. "It is here. I know it is here. He always held out on me." 75%, Rick said. I watched them turn on each other. The frustration was mounting. The easy money wasn't there and the panic was setting in. Suddenly, Preston froze. He looked at the laptop on the table. "Who is touching my computer?" he asked. My heart stopped. Had he seen the screen flicker, Madison rolled her eyes. "I am just charging my phone, Preston." "Relax. Get off it," Preston snapped, walking toward the table. "I have sensitive files open." 99%, Rick whispered. "Come on, come on." Preston reached for the USB drive. His hand was inches away from pulling the plug. "Done," Rick hit the enter key. "Connection severed." "We got it." Preston yanked the USB out and threw it at Madison. "Don't touch my stuff," I breathed out. We were safe. I turned to my computer. Rick had organized the downloaded files into folders. "Let's see what you are hiding, son," I said. I opened the folder marked Financials. It was a disaster. Gambling debts. Heavy losses in crypto. But then I saw a folder nested deep inside a system directory. It was labeled Syndicate. I double-clicked it. A PDF opened. It wasn't a bank loan. It was a promissory note. But it wasn't on bank letterhead. It was typed on plain paper signed in blood-red ink. I leaned in, reading the terms. My blood ran cold. Borrower Preston Caldwell. Lender, the Chicago outfit. South Branch. Amount $15 million. Collateral Caldwell Logistics. Title and assets. Due date Wednesday, November 15th. I looked at Rick. He was pale. The outfit, Rick whispered. That is the mob. That is the real deal. Harrison, he didn't just borrow money from loan sharks. He borrowed from the people who put you in concrete shoes if you miss a payment. I scrolled down. There were emails attached. Threatening emails, photos of Preston walking into his apartment, photos of Madison shopping, photos of Patricia at the salon. They were watching him. They were watching all of them. Preston isn't just selling the company to get rich, I realized, my voice low. He is selling the company to stay alive. If he doesn't pay them by Wednesday, they are going to kill him. I looked back at the camera feed. Preston was sitting on the floor amidst the rubble of my library, his head in his hands. Patricia was screaming at Madison. They looked like a normal, dysfunctional, greedy family, but they were walking dead men. He owes $15 million, I said, and he bet my company on a coin toss. Rick looked at me. What do we do? This is criminal. We can go to the FBI now. This proves he is being extorted. No, I said. If we go to the FBI, the mob goes underground, and they might decide to liquidate the debt by liquidating my son before the police can get to him. I stared at Preston's pathetic figure. He was a fool. He was a traitor. But he was my blood. And I wasn't going to let some street thug execute a Caldwell. I stood up. Pull up the contact info for the lender, I told Rick. You are not thinking what I think you are thinking, Rick said. I am going to make a call, I said, buttoning my jacket. Preston signed a deal with the devil, but he forgot that his father used to drive trucks through hell for a living. I need to find out who holds the paper. And then I am going to buy it, Harrison Rick warned. These people, they are butchers. I know, I said, turning to the door. I went to high school with the head of the South Side branch. His name is Tony. They call him the Butcher. And it is time for a reunion. Scene 5 was closed. The comedy of errors in the library was over. Now the genre was changing. It was becoming a thriller. And I was walking straight into the lion's den. The digital document glowing on the screen was not just a PDF file, it was a death sentence written in Times New Roman. I stared at the numbers until they blurred together. $15 million. My son Preston had not just made a bad investment, he had taken a flamethrower to a fortune. He had leveraged his position, his name, and my legacy to buy into a cryptocurrency scam that evaporated overnight. But the money was not the problem. Money is renewable. Blood is not. The creditor listed on the bottom of the page was a shell corporation called Cicero Holdings, but I knew that name. Everyone who drove a truck in Chicago in the 80s knew that name. It belonged to the outfit. Specifically, it belonged to Anthony the Butcher Moretti. No relation to my lawyer Rick, but a man who shared the same ruthless efficiency. I looked at the date. Wednesday. That was the deadline. If Preston did not pay $15 million by Wednesday, they would not sue him. They would not send him a stern letter. They would find him and they would make an example of him. That explained everything. The rush to sell the company to BlackRock. The desperation in his eyes. The way he let his mother take the lead while he sweated in the background. He was not trying to build an empire. He was trying to buy his life back. Harrison Rick said, his voice trembling as he looked at the screen. We have to call the FBI. This is extortion. This is a capital crime. We can get Preston into witness protection. I closed the laptop slowly. Witness protection. My son living out his days as a manager at a Cinnabon in Omaha. No. That is not how a Caldwell handles his mistakes. And that is not how I save my company. If the feds get involved, they freeze the assets for years as evidence. The company dies. The employees lose everything. Get the car, Rick, I said, standing up and buttoning my tuxedo jacket. It was still damp, but it felt like armor now. Where are we going? Rick asked, grabbing his keys. We are going to the meatpacking district, I said. I have an old friend to visit. The drive was silent. The rain had turned into a steady, rhythmic drumming on the roof of the Mercedes. I watched the city pass by. The neon lights reflected on the wet pavement like spilled oil. I remembered driving these streets in an 18-wheeler hauling beef from the slaughterhouses to the markets. I was tough then. I had to be. You did not drive a truck in this city without knowing who controlled the loading docks. Anthony Moretti controlled them then, and he controlled them now. We pulled up to a nondescript brick building on the corner of Halsted. The sign said, Tony's Quality Meats. The lights were off in the front, but I knew the back would be busy. It was 3 a.m, the time when the real business of Chicago happened. Stay in the car, Rick, I ordered. Keep the engine running. If I am not out in 20 minutes, drive away and never look back. I stepped out into the alley. The smell hit me instantly. Iron, sawdust, raw meat. It was a smell that triggered a primal instinct in me. I walked to the steel door and knocked 3 times. A heavy pause. Then the slot slid open. A pair of eyes stared out. We are closed, a voice growled. Tell Tony that Harry the Hammer is here, I said. The eyes widened slightly. That nickname had not been spoken in 40 years. The slot slammed shut. I heard the sound of heavy locks disengaging. The door swung open. I walked through a corridor lined with hanging sides of beef. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. At the end of the hall was a glass office lit by a warm yellow lamp. Sitting behind a desk that looked small beneath his bulk was Tony. He was older now, his hair white, but his eyes were the same. Dark, intelligent, and completely devoid of pity. He was cutting a slice of capicola with a small knife. Harry Caldwell. Tony said, not looking up. I saw you on the news. They say you lost your mind. They say you are an invalid. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down. Do I look like an invalid to you, Tony? He looked up then. He studied my face. He looked at the mud on my shoes, the determination in my jaw. He smiled, revealing gold-capped teeth. No, you look like the kid who used to swing a tire iron when the Union boys tried to shake him down. You look like trouble. I am not here for trouble, Tony. I am here for business. Tony laughed. A deep rumbling sound. You have no business, Harry. Your wife took your checkbook. Your son took your throne. You are a king without a kingdom. I leaned forward. I may not have my checkbook, but I know what you have. You have a promissory note signed by Preston Caldwell for $15 million, due Wednesday. The room went quiet. The only sound was the hum of the refrigeration units. Tony put the knife down. That is a private matter between me and the boy, Tony said softly. He played the crypto market. He lost. He borrowed to cover his margin. He lost again. He is a bad gambler, Harry, and bad gamblers pay a tax. He is selling my company to pay you, I said. He is gutting a 40-year legacy to save his own skin. Tony shrugged. Money is money, Harry. I don't care where it comes from. Black rock, white rock. As long as the check clears on Wednesday, the kid lives. If not, Tony made a slicing motion across his throat. Strictly business. I reached into my inner pocket. Tony's guards tensed their hands, moving to their jackets. I moved slowly. I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a routing number for a bank in Zurich. I am not here to beg for his life, Tony, I said, my voice steady. And I am not here to pay off his debt. Tony looked confused. Then what are you doing here? I slid the paper across the desk. This is an account I opened in 1985, before I met Patricia, before the IPO. It has exactly $15 million in it. It was my exit strategy if the world ever fell apart. Tonight, the world fell apart. You want to pay for him? Tony asked, reaching for the paper. No, I said sharply. I stopped his hand. Listen to me clearly, Tony. I am not paying his debt. I am buying it. Tony froze. He looked at me, trying to understand the angle. I want you to transfer the note to me, I continued. I want the original contract, the emails, the threats, the photos, everything you have on Preston. In exchange, I wire you the $15 million right now. You get your money 3 days early. No risk. No need to dispose of a body. Tony sat back, whistling low. You want to hold the paper on your own son. You want to be the one holding the knife. He betrayed me, Tony. He tried to lock me in a cage. He tried to destroy everything I built. If anyone is going to decide his fate, it is going to be me. Not you. Not the outfit. Me. Tony looked at me with a new kind of respect. It was the respect one predator has for another. He saw the coldness in my eyes. He saw that I had crossed a line that night that most men never even approach. He picked up the phone. He dialed a number. Verify the funds, he barked. He read the numbers from my paper. He waited. He nodded. He hung up. The money is good. He opened his desk drawer. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the desk. Here is the original note, Tony said. And the digital copies are on a drive in there. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy. It weighed $15 million. It weighed the soul of my son. Pleasure doing business with you, Harry, Tony said, cutting another slice of meat. You know, for a minute there, I thought you were going to go soft. I thought you were going to be a father. I stood up, tucking the envelope into my jacket. I am a father, Tony. That is why I am doing this. A father teaches his children lessons. Sometimes those lessons are expensive. I walked out of the office. The cold air of the freezer hallway felt good against my skin. I walked past the sides of beef, past the guards, and out into the rainy night. Rick unlocked the car doors as I approached. I slid into the passenger seat, dripping wet, but feeling lighter than I had in years. Did you get it? Rick asked, looking at the envelope. I patted my chest. I got it. Rick started the engine. So the debt is paid, Preston is safe. I looked out the window as we pulled away. The debt is not paid, Rick. The debt has just been transferred. And the new collection agent is a lot less forgiving than the butcher. Rick looked at me, a shiver seeming to run down his spine. Harrison, what are you going to do? I'm going to wait, I said. I am going to let him think he is safe. I am going to let him walk into that boardroom on Monday, thinking he has won. And then when he is at the very top of the mountain, I am going to show him this piece of paper. And I am going to push him off. Drive, Rick. We have a dinner to prepare for. Patricia invited me to a reconciliation meal tomorrow night. She wants me to sign some more papers. Rick merged onto the highway. You are going to go after everything. Oh, I am going, I said, watching the city lights blur. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I need to look her in the eye one last time before I burn her house down. I touched the envelope again. I now held the leverage. I held the weapon. My son had sold his soul to the devil, but the devil had just sold it to me. And come Monday, I would come to collect. Sunday evening arrived with a deceptive calm. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets of Lake Forest glistening under the streetlights. I stood outside the wrought iron gates of my own estate, pressing the intercom button like a solicitor. It was a humiliation that burned in my gut, but I swallowed it down. I was not Harrison Caldwell, the master of this house. Tonight, I was the guest. I was the problem that needed to be managed. The gate buzzed open with a mechanical click. I walked up the long, winding driveway, looking at the manicured hedges and the stone fountain I had installed for our 20th anniversary. Every brick of this house was paid for with my sweat, and tonight I was walking into it to sign it away. Or at least that is what they thought. Patricia opened the front door herself. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and slacks looking the picture of suburban elegance. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless. There was no trace of the screaming banshee who had destroyed the library the night before. She had put her mask back on. "Harrison," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweetness. "I am so glad you decided to come. Please come in out of the cold." I stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of rosemary and roasted lamb. It was the smell of Sunday dinners from a decade ago, before the money became more important than the meal. Preston was waiting in the dining room, pouring himself a drink. He looked better than he had on the camera feed. He was shaved, dressed in a crisp polo shirt, but his leg was bouncing nervously. He knew tomorrow was Monday. He knew the clock was ticking on his $15 million debt. He needed me to sign, or he was a dead man. "Hello, Dad," Preston said, not making eye contact. He took a long swallow of his scotch. I walked to my usual seat at the head of the table, but Patricia gently took my arm. "No, Harrison," she said softly. "Why don't you sit over here by the fire? It is warmer." She steered me to the side of the table. The guest seat. The seat where I sat people I did not trust. The symbolism was not lost on me. I sat down slowly, feigning the stiffness of age. I let my hands rest on the table, trembling slightly. We started to eat. The food was excellent, prepared by the chef I had hired, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. Patricia kept up a stream of meaningless chatter. She talked about the weather. She talked about the garden club. She talked about everything except the elephant in the room. She was softening me up. She was lulling the old lion to sleep before she pulled the trigger. Finally, as the plates were cleared, Patricia signaled to Preston. He reached under the table and pulled out a leather portfolio. He placed it in front of me. "Harrison," Patricia began, her voice dropping to a whisper of concern. "We need to talk about the future. We are so worried about you. That display at the hotel, living in that filthy warehouse. It is not right. You are not well." I looked down at my hands. "I am tired, Patty," I said, keeping my voice low and raspy. "I am just so tired." "I know," she said, reaching across the table to cover my hand with hers. Her skin was soft, but her grip was cold. "That is why we want to help you. We want you to rest. You have worked hard for 40 years. It is time to let go." She opened the portfolio. Inside was a single document. It was titled Voluntary Declaration of Incapacity and Transfer of Executive Powers. It was a death certificate for my career. If I signed this, I was admitting I was mentally unfit. I was handing over full control of the company, the assets, and my own life to Patricia as my conservator. It would allow them to bypass the court hearing on Friday. It would allow them to sell the company to BlackRock tomorrow morning without a single legal hurdle. Patricia handed me a pen. It was a Mont Blanc. My Mont Blanc. "Just sign this, Harrison," she said. "It just says that you are letting Preston and me handle the heavy lifting for a while. It says you trust us." I picked up the pen. I looked at the paper. I looked at Preston. He was staring at the pen with the intensity of a starving wolf. "If I sign this," I said, looking at Patricia, "what happens to me?" She smiled a benevolent smile that didn't reach her eyes. "If you sign this, you don't have to go back to that warehouse. You can stay here. We prepared the guest suite downstairs for you. It is warm. It has a TV. We will hire a nurse to look after you. You will be safe, Harrison. You will be home." The cruelty of it almost made me break character. She was offering me a room in my own house as if it were charity. She was offering to imprison me with a nurse paid for with my own money. And if I don't sign, I asked. Her smile vanished. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "If you don't sign, Harrison, then you are on your own. The accounts remain frozen. The car remains confiscated. You can walk back to the south side in the dark. And when the court hearing comes, we will have 10 doctors testify that you are a danger to yourself. You won't end up in the guest room. You will end up in a state facility. And they are not kind to old men who scream about conspiracies. It was a naked threat. Sign or die. I looked down at the paper again. I knew the law. Rick had taught me well. A document signed under duress is invalid, but proving duress is hard. However, there was another technicality, a specific nuance in the corporate bylaws of Caldwell Logistics. All binding executive orders must be signed with the registered legal signature of the chairman. My legal signature, the one on file with the SEC and the banks, was Harrison J. Caldwell. The J stood for James, my father's name. I never signed anything important without the J. It was my mark. But tonight, I was a confused old man. Tonight, I was losing my mind. I uncapped the pen. I let my hand hover over the signature line. "I just want to sleep," I whispered. "Then sign." Preston hissed. "Just sign the damn paper." I pressed the pen to the paper. I wrote slowly. I wrote big, shaky letters. H. Caldwell. No J. No middle initial. Just H. Caldwell. The signature I used for birthday cards. The signature I used for restaurant bills. To the untrained eye, it looked like my name. To a bank or a courtroom, it was my name. But to the corporate charter of my company, it was a ghost. It was legally insufficient to transfer voting rights. But more importantly, by signing it, I was creating physical evidence. This document dated tonight would prove that Patricia visited me. It would prove she tried to bypass the court. And when I revealed tomorrow that I was perfectly sane, this piece of paper would not be proof of my incompetence. It would be proof of her extortion. It would show the judge that she preyed on a man she claimed was sick to get what she wanted. I finished the signature and put the pen down. "There," I said. "Is it done?" Patricia snatched the paper away before the ink was even dry. She checked the signature. She didn't notice the missing J. She only saw the letters that spelled victory. "Yes," she breathed, a look of pure triumph crossing her face. "Yes, Harrison, it is done." She stood up. Preston stood up too, grabbing the bottle of scotch. "We have a lot of work to do for tomorrow," Patricia said, clutching the portfolio to her chest. I looked up at her. "Can I go to the room now, the guest room?" Patricia looked at me, and for a second I saw the debate in her eyes. She had what she wanted. She didn't need to be kind anymore. "Actually, Harrison," she said, checking her watch, "the nurse won't be here until tomorrow. And we really need to prepare the house for the appraisers. It might be better if you went back to your place for one more night." My place. She meant the warehouse. She had lied. Of course she had lied. She never intended to let me stay. She wanted me gone. "But you promised?" I stammered, standing up unsteadily. "I said we would see," she corrected me, her voice cold and final. "Charles is waiting outside. He will drive you back. Be grateful for the ride, Harrison." Most ex-wives wouldn't be so generous. She turned her back on me and walked out of the room. Preston followed her, not even saying goodbye. He just checked his phone, probably texting the mobsters that the money was coming. I stood alone in the dining room of the house I built. The smell of the roast lamb was nauseating now. I straightened my back. The tremble in my hands vanished. I looked at the empty doorway where my family had disappeared. "You broke the contract, Patricia," I whispered to the empty room. "You took the signature, but you didn't deliver the goods." I walked to the front door. Charles was indeed waiting. He looked ashamed as I slid into the back seat. "Back to the warehouse, Mr. Caldwell?" he asked. "No." "Charles the First," said my voice strong and clear. "Take me to the warehouse, but drive slowly. I want to enjoy the ride. It is the last time I will be riding in the back. Tomorrow I am driving." As the car pulled away, I watched the lights of the mansion fade in the rearview mirror. Patricia was probably opening champagne right now. She thought she had a signed confession of my weakness. What she actually had was a signed confession of her own crime. I touched the pocket where the debt note from the butcher was hidden. I had the mob on one side and the law on the other. And tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I was going to introduce my family to both of them. The dinner was over. Now it was time for the slaughter. Monday morning arrived with the color of slate gray steel. It was 10 o'clock sharp. From the comfort of my customized van parked 2 blocks away from the Caldwell Logistics headquarters, I watched the monitor. I had tapped into the boardroom teleconferencing system. The image was crisp. The audio was crystal clear. It was the final act of their little tragedy, and they didn't even know a curtain was about to fall. Inside the boardroom, the air was thick enough to choke on. The long mahogany table, which I had commissioned from a craftsman in Vermont 20 years ago, was polished to a mirror shine. Seated on one side were the Sharks from BlackRock. 3 men and 1 woman, all dressed in suits that cost more than my drivers made in a month. They looked impatient. They looked hungry. They were not there for a partnership. They were there for a carcass. On the other side sat my family. Patricia was in the center wearing a navy blue power suit that was meant to project stability. She was smiling that practiced, tight smile she used at charity galas when she wanted to leave. But it was Preston who drew my attention. My son looked like a man standing on a gallows with the rope already around his neck. His skin was pale, a stark contrast to his dark designer suit. His leg was bouncing under the table, a nervous tic he had developed as a child whenever he lied. I zoomed in on his hands. They were trembling. He was clutching his phone under the table. I didn't need to hack his screen to know what he was looking at. It was Wednesday. The deadline was 48 hours away. But the mob doesn't wait until the last minute to remind you. They send texts. They send pictures. They remind you that the clock is ticking louder than your heart. Mr. Caldwell, the lead negotiator from BlackRock, said, checking his Rolex, "We are on a tight schedule. The funds are in escrow. We just need the signatures to release the transfer." Patricia placed a hand on Preston's arm. It looked affectionate, but I knew she was digging her nails in, silently commanding him to pull it together. "Of course," Patricia said, her voice smooth as silk. "We are just so emotional. It is a big day. Letting go of a family legacy is never easy." Preston cleared his throat. It sounded like grinding gears. "Yes. Right. Legacy." He stood up. He was supposed to give a speech, a final farewell to the company his father built. He looked at the investors, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. "Gentlemen," Preston began, his voice cracking, "Caldwell Logistics has always been about moving forward. My father, he was a great man in his time. But the industry has changed. We need to be agile. We need to be digital. This acquisition, this merger, it is the next step in our evolution. With your capital and our infrastructure, we will dominate the Midwest." He was rambling. He was using buzzwords he had read in a magazine. He didn't know the first thing about logistics. He didn't know that the drivers were the heart of the company, not the software. The BlackRock representative nodded clearly, bored. "Very inspiring, Preston. Now, if we could proceed to the documents." He slid a thick stack of papers across the table. "The sale agreement, $200 million. Preston reached for his pen. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead. He was 5 seconds away from salvation. 5 seconds away from paying off the butcher. 5 seconds away from burying me. He uncapped the pen. The tip hovered over the paper. "Now," I whispered in the van. I pressed a button on my console. It wasn't a detonator for a bomb, but it might as well have been. It sent a signal to the team waiting in the lobby. On the screen, the double doors of the boardroom didn't just open. They burst inward with a violence that made everyone jump. Preston dropped the pen. Patricia gasped, standing up in outrage. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked. "Security," But it wasn't security standing in the doorway. It was a man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase that looked like it contained the secrets of the universe. Behind him were 4 other people. 2 of them wore windbreakers with 3 letters printed in bold yellow on the chest. SEC. The man in the gray suit stepped forward. He didn't look at Patricia. He didn't look at the investors. He looked straight at Preston. "Preston Caldwell," he asked. His voice was calm, detached, terrifying. Preston couldn't speak. He just nodded, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. "My name is Julian Sterling," the man said. "I am a forensic accountant appointed by the minority shareholders of Caldwell Logistics, and these agents are from the Securities and Exchange Commission." The BlackRock rep stood up slowly, sensing the toxicity in the room. "What is going on here? We are in the middle of a closing." "Not anymore," Sterling said. He walked to the table and slammed a file down on top of the sale agreement. "We are serving an immediate injunction to halt all trading and transfer of assets regarding this company. We have uncovered irrefutable evidence of massive accounting fraud, inflation of asset valuation, and falsification of federal maintenance records." Patricia turned white. "That is a lie. My husband is the one who ran this company. If there are errors, they are his. He is incompetent." Sterling turned to her, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Mrs. Caldwell, the discrepancies we found didn't happen years ago. They happened in the last 6 months, specifically under the digital login credentials of the acting director, Preston Caldwell." He opened the file. He pointed to a chart. "We have traced digital alterations to the revenue streams. We have found ghost contracts. And most importantly, we have found a direct link between the company's reserve funds and a high-risk cryptocurrency exchange account registered to your son." The room went silent, the kind of silence that precedes an execution. The BlackRock rep looked at the file. He looked at the SEC agents. He didn't even look at the data. The word fraud was enough. In the world of high finance, fraud is a contagious disease. You don't try to cure it. You run from it. He closed his briefcase. "Deal is off," he said. "Wait," Patricia cried, grabbing his sleeve. "You can't just leave. This is a mistake we can explain. It is a setup, the old man. He did this." The investor pulled his arm away, as if she were radioactive. "Madam, if the SSEC is here, there is nothing to explain. Our legal team will be in touch regarding the breach of our letter of intent. Do not contact us." He signaled to his team. "Let's go." They walked out. They didn't run, but they moved with a speed that said they wanted to be as far away from the Caldwell name as possible. Preston sank into his chair. He wasn't looking at the investors leaving. He was looking at his phone. The screen had lit up again. Another message. I could imagine what it said. The butcher was watching the news. Or maybe he had a guy in the lobby. He knew the money was gone. Sterling looked at Preston. "Mr. Caldwell, these agents are going to seize all company servers and hard drives. You are advised not to leave the city. You are a person of interest in a federal investigation involving securities fraud and embezzlement." Preston looked up. His eyes were hollow. I didn't. Save it for the deposition," Sterling said. The agents moved in, securing the laptops, securing the phones. They were efficient. They were dismantling Preston's life piece by piece. Patricia was slumped in her chair, staring at the wall. Her power was gone. Her payday was gone. And she was realizing that the papers she made me sign last night, the ones giving her control, now meant she was the captain of a sinking ship. I sat back in the van. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold satisfaction. They wanted the company. They wanted the title. Now they had it. They had the wreckage. They had the federal investigation. They had the shame. But Preston. Preston had something worse. I watched him on the screen. He was shaking so hard the table vibrated. He knew what was coming. The SEC takes your freedom. The bank takes your house. But the syndicate, they take your breath. He was alone in a room full of people. He looked around for his mother, but she was too busy calculating her own defense to look at him. He looked at the door, but there was no escape. I reached for the microphone in the van. I could have spoken to them. I could have taunted them through the speaker system. But I didn't. Silence was a better weapon. Let them wonder. Let them panic. The meeting was adjourned. The judge had not banged a gavel, but the verdict was delivered. BlackRock was out. The feds were in, and the clock on Preston's life was ticking down to 0. I started the engine of the van. Phase 2 is complete, I said to myself. Now let's go see about the insurance policy. I drove away, leaving my son, Truss, in the ruins of his own greed, waiting for a bill collector that no bankruptcy court could protect him from. The sudden exit of the BlackRock executives sucked the air out of the boardroom. The silence that followed was broken only by Patricia's ragged breathing. She stood there, her face a mask of disbelief that was rapidly crumbling into fury. She turned on the SEC agents like a cornered animal. "Who do you think you are? You cannot just barge in here and disrupt a private transaction. This deal was authorized." She slammed her hand onto the table right next to the unsigned contracts. "My husband signed the transfer of powers. I have the document right here." She fumbled with her portfolio, her hands shaking so violently she dropped a few papers. She snatched up the declaration I had signed the night before and thrust it toward Julian Sterling. "Read it," he signed it. H. Caldwell, he gave us full authority. This investigation is harassment. Sterling didn't even blink. He looked at the paper with the same expression one might use when inspecting a parking ticket. Then he looked toward the door. "That document is interesting, Mrs. Caldwell," a new voice said from the doorway. "But I'm afraid it's not worth the paper it's printed on." Rick Moretti stepped into the room. He was calm, collected, and holding a small digital recorder in his hand. He walked past the stunned security guards and placed the device on the center of the mahogany table. "Who are you?" Patricia hissed. "I am Harrison Caldwell's attorney," Rick said. "And that document you are waving around? It was signed under duress, but you don't have to take my word for it." He pressed play. My voice filled the room, sounding frail and confused, just as I had acted. "If I sign this, what happens to me?" Then Patricia's voice, cold and manipulative. "If you sign this, you don't have to go back to that warehouse. You will be safe, Harrison." Then Preston's voice, sharp and cruel. "Just sign the damn paper." And finally Patricia's threat. "If you don't sign, you will end up in a state facility. And they are not kind to old men who scream about conspiracies." Rick stopped the recording. The silence in the room was now absolute. The SEC agents looked at Patricia with open disgust. Preston had sunk so low in his chair he was almost under the table. "That is coercion, Mrs. Caldwell," Rick said. "It is elder abuse, and it renders that signature legally void. But even if it wasn't coerced, you missed a detail. The corporate charter requires the signature Harrison J. Caldwell. Your husband signed H. Caldwell. He played you." Patricia stared at the paper in her hand. Her eyes widened as she finally saw the missing initial. She looked up, her face draining of color. He knew," she whispered. "He knew the whole time." "That is right, Patricia." I stepped through the doorway. I was not wearing the tuxedo anymore. I was wearing my old leather bomber jacket and jeans. The clothes I wore when I drove the first truck. I walked into the room not as a victim, but as the owner. Harrison. Patricia gasped. I ignored her. I walked straight to the head of the table. I looked at the empty chairs where the investors had been. Then I looked at Preston. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was trembling, tears streaming down his face. He knew what was coming. He knew the deadline was Wednesday, and he had just lost his only way to pay. "Dad, please," he whimpered. "I can explain." "Explain what, Preston?" I asked, my voice low and hard. "Explain why you cooked the books. Explain why you treated me like a senile dog. Or explain this." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the thick manila envelope I had bought from the butcher. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed like a gunshot. Preston stared at the envelope. He recognized the red wax seal. He recognized the handwriting on the front. "Oh, God," he choked out. How did you get that?" "I bought it, son," I said. "I bought your debt." Patricia looked between us, confused. "What is that? What debt?" I looked at her. "Your son didn't just sell the company for profit, Patricia. He sold it to save his life. He owes $15 million to the Chicago outfit, and the payment is due in 48 hours. Patricia let out a strangled cry. 15 million, Preston. Tell me this isn't true." Preston didn't answer. He just sobbed, putting his head on the table. "He leveraged the company," I continued. "But he didn't own the company. So he tried to steal it from me. He tried to lock me away in a mental institution so he could pay off his gambling losses." I walked over to Preston. I put a hand on his shoulder. He flinched as if I had burned him. "But here is the good news, Preston," I said coldly. "You don't owe the mob anymore. You owe me." I picked up the envelope and ripped it open. I pulled out the promissory note. "And since you don't have $15 million and you don't have a job anymore, I am activating the collateral clause. But instead of taking the company, which is already mine, I am taking your shares." I turned to the SEC agents. "Gentlemen, as of this moment, I am exercising my right under the Founders' Covenant to reclaim all voting stock held by Preston Caldwell due to gross financial misconduct and insolvency." I looked at Patricia. "And yours too, Patricia. Since you were a co-conspirator in the fraud, your shares are frozen pending the criminal investigation." Patricia fell back into her chair. She looked around the room, realizing the walls were closing in. "No, you can't do this. I built this life I deserve. You deserve nothing." I roared, my voice finally breaking the calm facade. "I gave you everything. I gave you a life most people only dream of, and you spat in my face. You looked at me with contempt. You betrayed me for money." I leaned over the table, staring into her terrified eyes. "You wanted to run the company. You wanted to be the boss. Well, congratulations, Patricia. You just ran it into the ground." Preston slid out of his chair. He fell to his knees on the plush carpet. He grabbed the hem of my jeans. "Dad, please," he begged, snot running down his nose. "Don't let them take me to jail, please. I am sorry. I will do anything." I looked down at him. My son. The boy I used to carry on my shoulders. Now a broken, weeping mess at my feet. I felt a pang of pity, but I strangled it. Pity had almost gotten me killed. "Get up, Preston," I said. "You are embarrassing yourself." He didn't move. He just kept crying. I looked at Julian Sterling. "Take them away. I want them out of my building." The SEC agents moved in. They pulled Preston to his feet. He was limp, dead weight. They handcuffed him. The click of the metal cuffs was the loudest sound in the world. Patricia stood up, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. She smoothed her skirt, but her hands were shaking uncontrollably. "I will get a lawyer, Harrison," she spat. "You haven't won yet." I looked at her one last time. "Patricia," I said softly, "look around you. You have lost your son. You have lost your husband. You have lost your fortune. And in about 10 minutes you are going to lose your freedom. Get a lawyer. Get 10. It won't change the fact that you are empty." She didn't say anything. She just walked out flanked by federal agents, her head held high in a mockery of pride. When the door closed, the room was finally quiet. I stood alone at the head of the table. The manila envelope lay open, the proof of my son's betrayal staring up at me. I sat down in my chair. It felt cold. Rick walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Harrison?" I looked at the window at the gray Chicago skyline. "No, Rick," I said. "I am not okay. I just sent my family to prison." "But you saved the company," Rick said. "You saved 4,000 jobs." I nodded slowly. I saved the kingdom, but I had to burn the castle to do it. I picked up the phone. I dialed my secretary's number. She had been crying in the hallway. "Sarah," I said, "call a press conference. Tell them Harrison Caldwell is back. And tell the drivers. Tell them the trucks roll tomorrow." I hung up. The war was over. I had won. But as I sat there in the silence of the boardroom, I realized that victory tastes a lot like tears. Scene 9 was finished. The villains were vanquished. But the story wasn't over. There was still the matter of the divorce and the final reckoning. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and stale anxiety. It was a sterile, windowless box where 40 years of marriage were about to be dissected like a frog in a biology class. I sat at the defendant table, my hands folded on the polished wood. I was wearing my best suit, a navy blue Brioni that fit me perfectly, now that I had stopped carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Beside me, Rick was arranging his files with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Across the aisle, Patricia sat with her lawyer, a high-priced shark named Vance, who was known for tearing husbands apart. Patricia looked tired. The events of last week had taken their toll. The federal agents seizing the house, the freezing of her personal accounts, the humiliation of Preston's arrest. But she still had that look in her eyes, that defiant, entitled glint that said she deserved to win. She was suing for 50% of my remaining personal assets. Even with the company gone from her grasp, half of my private estate was still worth nearly $100 million. She was fighting for her golden parachute. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Marcus Stone entered the room. He was a stern man, with silver hair and a face carved from granite. He sat down and adjusted his glasses, looking at the two parties before him, with a mixture of boredom and irritation. "We are here to hear the petition for divorce and division of assets in the matter of Caldwell versus Caldwell," the judge said. "Mr. Vance, you may proceed." Patricia's lawyer stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, my client has been a devoted wife for 40 years. She raised 2 children. She managed the household while Mr. Caldwell built his business. Under Illinois law, she is entitled to an equitable distribution of marital assets. We are asking for 50% of all holdings plus spousal support of $50,000 a month. Mr. Caldwell's recent erratic behavior and his vindictive actions against their son prove that he is acting out of malice. We simply want what is fair." Patricia dabbed at her dry eyes with a handkerchief. It was a good performance. The grieving wife discarded by the cruel, powerful tycoon. I felt a flash of anger, but Rick put a hand on my arm. He didn't even stand up immediately. He waited until the echo of Vance's words had faded, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. Then he stood. "Your Honor," Rick began, his voice calm and conversational. "We do not dispute that Mrs. Caldwell has been present for 40 years. We do not dispute that she raised the children. What we dispute is her definition of devotion." Rick walked to the center of the room. He was holding a small remote control. "Mr. Vance talks about fairness," Rick continued. "But fairness is a two-way street. And last week, while Mrs. Caldwell was claiming my client was senile, she was also quite busy." Rick pointed the remote at the large screen on the wall. An image appeared. It was a transcript of text messages. "Exhibit A," Rick said. These are text messages recovered from Mrs. Caldwell's phone. They were sent last Saturday night at approximately 3 in the morning, at the exact same time she was overseeing the destruction of Mr. Caldwell's library to find a non-existent safe. I watched Patricia. She squinted at the screen. Then her face went pale. Rick read the texts aloud. He bought the act. The old fool thinks I am helping him. Once we commit him on Monday, the money is ours. I will meet you in Cabo on Wednesday. Book the suite. Love you, Roger. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Roger. I knew a Roger. He was our personal trainer. He was half my age. Rick clicked the remote again. A photo appeared. It was Patricia and Roger sitting at a cafe in Paris 2 years ago. I thought she was on a shopping trip with her girlfriends. Your Honor, Rick said, turning to the judge. Mrs. Caldwell wasn't just planning to steal the company. She was planning to use the proceeds to run away with her lover. She has been engaged in an extramarital affair for at least 3 years. Patricia stood up, her face flushed with rage. That is an invasion of privacy. You had no right to tap my phone. The phone was company property, Mrs. Caldwell, Rick said smoothly. And as the chairman of the board, Mr. Caldwell has the right to monitor all company devices. You signed the user agreement yourself. The judge looked at Patricia with open disdain. Sit down, Mrs. Caldwell. But Rick wasn't done. He walked back to our table and picked up a yellowed, fragile-looking document. Now regarding the division of assets, Rick said. Mr. Vance is correct that Illinois is an equitable distribution state. However, that only applies in the absence of a prenuptial agreement. Vance laughed. A prenup after 40 years. That thing is ancient history. It has probably been invalidated by co-mingling of assets. Rick smiled. A shark's smile. Actually, this agreement has a very specific clause. Article 4, Section B, the Fidelity and Conspiracy Clause. Rick handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. It states, Rick quoted from memory, that if either party is found to have committed adultery or is found to have conspired to defraud the other party of their premarital or business assets, they forfeit all claims to marital property and spousal support. They leave the marriage with only the assets they brought into it. I looked at Patricia. She looked like she had been slapped. She had forgotten. 40 years of luxury had made her forget the terrified girl who signed that paper because she wanted to marry a rising star. She never thought I would enforce it. She never thought I would catch her. The judge read the document. He took a long time. He flipped the page. He adjusted his glasses. Then he looked up. This document is notarized and valid, the judge said. And the evidence of infidelity and conspiracy is overwhelming. The text messages the attempted guardianship fraud, the coerced signature on the transfer of power. It paints a very clear picture. The judge leaned forward, staring directly at Patricia. Mrs. Caldwell, in my 20 years on the bench, I have seen many ugly divorces, but I have never seen a spouse attempt to systematically destroy her partner's sanity and reputation for profit while planning a vacation with a paramour. It is cold, it is calculated, and it is abusive. Patricia was shaking her head. No. No, you can't do this. I have nothing. My name is on nothing. Exactly, the judge said. He banged his gavel. The sound was like a thunderclap. The court finds in favor of the respondent, Harrison Caldwell. The prenuptial agreement is upheld. Mrs. Caldwell is denied any share of the marital estate. She is denied spousal support. Furthermore, given the evidence of psychological manipulation and the false medical claims filed with this court, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for potential charges of elder abuse and fraud. Patricia let out a sound that was half gasp, half scream. She grabbed Vance's arm. Do something, he is taking everything. Vance pulled his arm away. He started packing his briefcase. There is nothing to do, Patricia. You signed it, and you got caught. I will send you the bill for my services." Patricia looked around the room wild-eyed. She looked at the gallery. Preston was there out on bail, sitting in the back row. Madison was next to him. Patricia ran toward the railing. "Preston Madison. Help me talk to him. Talk to your father." I turned in my chair to watch. This was the moment. The final test of loyalty. Preston looked at his mother. He saw a woman who was now a liability. A woman who was broke. A woman facing criminal charges. He didn't see his mother. He saw an anchor that would drag him down faster. He stood up, pulling his coat collar up. "Come on, Maddie. Let's go." Madison looked at her mother, then at me. She saw my cold, impassive face. She grabbed her purse. "Sorry, Mom," she whispered. I can't be involved in this." They turned and walked out. They walked fast. They didn't look back. Patricia stood there, her hands gripping the wooden railing, watching her children abandon her, just as she had abandoned me. The color drained from her face. Her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the floor of the courtroom in a heap of expensive fabric and broken dreams. The bailiff moved to help her, but I didn't. I just watched. "Mr. Caldwell." Rick asked. "Do you want to check on her?" I stood up and buttoned my jacket. "No, Rick. She is not my wife anymore. She is just a stranger who fainted." I walked past her. I didn't look down. I walked out of the courtroom doors into the hallway. The air out here was fresher. It smelled of freedom. The heavy doors swung shut behind me, sealing away the past. I was 70 years old. I was single. And for the first time in 40 years, I was completely, utterly free. Scene 10 was closed. The queen had fallen. Now only the pawns remained, and they were about to learn that running away does not mean you have escaped. It has been 30 days since the gavel fell and shattered my family into 1,000 jagged pieces. 30 days since I walked out of that courtroom a free man. 30 days since they walked out into a world that no longer cared about the name Caldwell. I did something that surprised my lawyer, Rick. I posted bail for Preston. $2 million. Rick thought I was going soft. He thought I was forgiving the boy who tried to sell my life to the mob. But I wasn't being kind. I was being strategic. Prison is a terrible place, but it offers 3 meals a day and a roof over your head. It offers structure. I didn't want Preston to have structure. I wanted him to experience the terror of freedom when you have absolutely nothing to support it. Now he is living in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, wearing a GPS ankle monitor that blinks red every few seconds, reminding him that he is property of the state. He cannot leave the county. He cannot get a job because his face was splashed across every financial newspaper in the country as a fraudster. The Ivy League degree I paid for is now just a piece of paper that makes employers laugh before they throw his resume in the trash. I have my private investigator, a quiet man named Miller, keep tabs on them. Not because I care, but because I need to know the lesson is sinking in. The reports he sends me are grim. Madison was the first to break. The bank didn't wait long to foreclose on her penthouse. The doorman, a man she had walked past for 5 years without ever saying hello, was the one who put her Louis Vuitton suitcases on the curb. They took her Range Rover. They took her jewelry. Miller sent me a photo of her standing outside a pawn shop on State Street, arguing with the clerk. She was trying to sell her collection of handbags. The clerk offered her $500 for a bag that cost $10,000. She took it. She took it because she was hungry. Now she sleeps on the floor of the same motel room where Preston stays, wrapped in a coat that is the last remnant of her former life. But Patricia's fall was the hardest. The woman who used to host galas for the governor, The woman who wouldn't drink wine unless it was a specific vintage is now wearing a stained polyester apron. She found a job at a 24-hour diner near the highway. They pay her minimum wage plus tips. I drove by there once late at night in my tinted SUV. I watched through the window. She was pouring coffee for a truck driver. Her hands were shaking. She spilled a little on the table, and the manager, a kid no older than 25, yelled at her in front of the whole restaurant. Patricia Caldwell. The Queen of Lake Forest lowered her head and wiped the table with a dirty rag. She looked old. She looked defeated. Yesterday, the tension finally snapped. Miller sent me the audio recording from the bug he placed in their motel room. It started over dinner. They were eating cold pizza from a box. "This is your fault," Patricia's voice hissed. She sounded exhausted. "If you hadn't been so greedy with that crypto nonsense, we would still be in the house. We would have the company." "My fault," Preston shouted. His voice was shrill, edgy. "You are the one who pushed for the conservatorship. You are the one who said he was senile. You were so desperate to be the CEO that you didn't check the paperwork." "I did it for us," Patricia screamed. "I did it because you were drowning." "You did it because you wanted the money for your boyfriend," Madison yelled. "Don't act like you are a saint, Mom." Dad showed the photos in court. "You were going to leave us too." "Shut up," Patricia shrieked. There was a sound of a scuffle, a sharp slap, then silence. "I didn't mean it," Patricia whispered. I am just so stressed." Preston laughed. It was a broken manic sound. "Stressed, Mom. I am facing 20 years in federal prison. The only reason I am not in a cell right now is because the man I tried to destroy paid my bail. Do you know how humiliating that is? He owns me. He owns my freedom. We have nothing." Madison sobbed. "I have $10 left. They are going to kick us out of this room tomorrow." "What are we going to do? Where are we going to go?" The room went silent for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the cheap air conditioner and Madison's quiet weeping. They were realizing that rock bottom has a basement, and they were standing in it. "We have to go back," Preston said quietly. "Go back where Patricia asked. To the house. To Dad." "He hates us," Madison said. "He threw us out." "He is still our father," Preston said. "And he is your husband, Mom. He has the money. He has the power. He is the only one who can stop the prosecutor. He is the only one who can give us a place to stay." "I can't face him," Patricia whispered. "Not after the trial." "Do you want to sleep under a bridge?" Preston snapped. "Because that is the alternative. We have no friends, Mom. The country club revoked your membership. Your boyfriend blocked your number. We are radioactive. Dad is the only option left." I listened to the recording in my office, staring at the empty chair where Preston used to sit. They weren't coming back because they loved me. They weren't coming back because they were sorry. They were coming back because they were hungry. They were coming back because the parasite needs the host. I heard the rustling of clothes on the tape. "Fine," Patricia said, her voice trembling. "We go tomorrow. We beg. We get on our knees if we have to. He has to have a heart somewhere. He can't just watch us die." I turned off the tape. A heart. Yes, I had a heart. But over the last month I had encased it in steel. They were coming to beg. They expected the old Harrison, the soft Harrison, the Harrison who forgave everything because family is family. They were in for a shock. I picked up my phone and called Charles, my driver. Charles the First said, "Make sure the gate is unlocked tomorrow evening." "You want to let them in?" Sir Charles asked, surprised. "Yes," I said. "Let them in. But don't let them into the house. Have them wait in the driveway." "But sir, the forecast says it is going to rain again." "I know, Charles," I said, looking out at the gathering storm clouds. "I know." I hung up. They wanted to wash away their sins. Well, I would give them the water. But the cleansing wasn't going to be free. Scene 11 was over. The rats were returning to the ship they tried to sink, and the captain was waiting on the deck, not with a life preserver, but with a final judgment. The rain was falling in sheets of gray steel hammering against the roof of my Bentley, with a rhythm that sounded like judgment. I sat in the back seat, warm and dry, watching the water streak down the tinted glass. Outside, the world was drowning. It was the kind of storm that washes the streets clean, but I knew that some stains were too deep to be removed by water alone. Charles, my driver, sat in the front, his hands gripping the wheel tight. He looked in the rearview mirror, his eyes asking a question he was too afraid to voice. I nodded once. He turned off the engine, but he kept the lights on. The twin beams cut through the darkness, illuminating the three figures standing at the wrought iron gates of the Lake Forest estate. They looked like ghosts of the people they used to be. A month ago, they had stood in this very driveway, dressed in silk and velvet, laughing as they planned my demise. Now they were huddled together like stray dogs seeking shelter from a hurricane. Patricia was soaking wet. Her hair, usually sprayed into an immovable helmet of perfection, was plastered to her skull. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black rivulets, making her look like a weeping clown. Preston stood behind her, shivering in a jacket that was too thin for the November chill. Madison was hugging herself, her teeth chattering so hard I could almost hear it over the rain. They saw the car. They saw the light. They rushed toward the window, their hands slapping against the glass. It was a pathetic sight. The people who had wanted to be kings were now reduced to beggars. I pressed the button on the door panel. The electric motor hummed softly. The heavy glass window slid down. I stopped it exactly 2 inches. Just a crack. Just enough for my voice to get out, and for their desperation to get in. I did not unlock the doors. I did not invite them in. This vehicle was my sanctuary, and they had lost the right to enter it. Dad Preston choked out, shoving his face near the crack. His voice was cracked and broken. "Dad, please, open the door. It is freezing out here. We have nowhere to go. They kicked us out of the motel. I am your blood. I am your son. Look at me. I am flesh and blood." I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the weakness. He still thought that biology was a currency he could spend. Patricia pushed him aside. She pressed her face to the opening. The smell of wet wool and stale desperation drifted into the car. "Harry," she sobbed. "Harry, please. I know we made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But 40 years, Harry. We have 40 years of history. You cannot just leave us out here to die in the storm. We are your family. We are sorry. God, we are so sorry." She reached her hand through the crack, her fingers grasping at the empty air, trying to touch me. I leaned back out of reach. Her fingers looked pale and skeletal in the harsh light. I looked at them, really looked at them. For decades I had solved their problems with a checkbook. When Preston crashed his car, I bought him a new one. When Madison maxed out her credit cards, I paid the bill. When Patricia felt bored, I bought her a vacation. I had crippled them with my generosity. I had turned them into invalids who could not walk without my money as a crutch. I reached into the leather seat pocket in front of me. I pulled out 3 envelopes. They were plain white envelopes, thin. They did not contain cash. They did not contain keys to a new apartment. I slid the first envelope through the crack in the window. Preston grabbed it, tearing it open with trembling hands. He pulled out the single sheet of paper. He squinted at it in the dim light. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It is a job application, Preston," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the rain like a knife. "For the warehouse on 35th Street. The loading dock. The night shift manager is expecting you at midnight. You will lift boxes. You will load trucks. You will sweat. And you will earn $15 an hour." Preston looked at me as if I had shot him. A loader, Dad. Are you serious? I have an MBA. I cannot be a manual laborer. My back. Your MBA is worthless because you have no integrity, I interrupted him. And your back is the only thing you have left that has any value. You want to eat, you lift. I slid the second envelope through the crack. Madison took it. She didn't open it. She just stared at me, her eyes wide and fearful. Madison, I said, that is for the call center downtown, the graveyard shift. You will answer phones for customers who are angry, tired, and rude. You will listen to them scream at you, and you will apologize. You will learn what it feels like to serve someone other than yourself. She started to cry, a low keening sound. Daddy, I can't. I don't know how to do that. You will learn, I said, or you will starve. It is amazing how quickly the human brain adapts when the stomach is empty. Finally, I looked at Patricia. She was staring at the last envelope in my hand. She looked terrified. Harry, she whispered. What do you have for me? The diner fired me. No one will hire me. I slid the envelope to her. She took it slowly, as if it were a bomb. That is not a job offer. Patricia, I said, that is a plea deal. She opened it. She read the first few lines. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the window frame to stay upright. Sanitation, she gasped. Public restrooms. The district attorney wanted to charge you with fraud and elder abuse, I said calmly. He wanted to put you in a cell for 5 years. I convinced him to give you probation, on one condition. You complete 2,000 hours of community service, specifically cleaning the public toilets in the city parks. No, she wailed. Harry, no. I can't. It is humiliating. People will see me. My friends will see me. Your friends are gone, Patricia, I said. And yes, it is humiliating. But stealing from your husband is humiliating. Drugging your husband is humiliating. Working is dignified. Scrubbing a floor is honest. It is the first honest thing you will have done in 20 years. I looked at the three of them. They stood in the rain holding their sentences in their hands. They looked at the papers, then at me. They were waiting for the punchline. They were waiting for me to laugh and open the door and tell them it was all a cruel joke. But I didn't laugh. Do the work, I said. Show up. Sweat. Bleed. Learn what $1 actually costs. But Dad Preston cried. When can we come home? I looked him dead in the eye. Work first, I said. Prove to me that you are human beings. Prove to me that you can survive without sucking my blood. Then and only then we will talk about whether you deserve to be called family. I pressed the button. The window began to slide up. Harry, Patricia screamed. Harry, don't close it. I watched the glass rise. It shut out the rain. It shut out the cold. And it shut out the pleas of the people who had tried to destroy me. Drive, Charles I said. The Bentley pulled away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew they would take the jobs. They had no choice. And for the first time in their lives, I had actually given them something of value. I had given them a chance to become real. 3 months have passed since the storm broke over my life. The winter snow has finally melted, revealing the first green shoots of spring in Chicago. I am sitting in the executive office, the same room where my father sat, the same room where I built this empire from nothing. But the air feels different now. It is lighter. The heavy oak door is open. The silence is not lonely anymore. It is peaceful. I swivel my chair toward the bank of monitors on the wall. These are not the secret cameras I used to catch a thief in my own home. These are the standard operational feeds of the warehouse floor and the call center. I zoom in on camera 4. There is Preston. He is wearing a blue jumpsuit with his name stitched on the pocket. He is lifting a heavy crate onto a wooden pallet. His face is red. Sweat is dripping from his nose. His hair, once styled with expensive gel and cut by the best barbers in the city, is messy and matted under a safety cap. He looks tired, but as I watch, he stops to wipe his forehead. He exchanges a few words with the shift supervisor, a man named Mike who takes no nonsense and cares nothing for last names. Preston nods. He does not roll his eyes. He does not check a phone. He just bends his knees, braces his back, and lifts the next box. For the first time in 40 years, my son is actually working. He is not moving imaginary money around on a computer screen. He is moving weight. He is learning that gravity does not care who your father is. If you do not lift it, it does not move. He is learning the physics of survival. I switch the feed to the customer service floor. Camera 9. Madison is sitting in a cubicle. It is small. It is gray. It is a far cry from the penthouse and the boutique shopping sprees. She is wearing a headset. I can see her lips moving. She is frowning, listening to someone complain in her ear. I watch her hand hover over the mute button. The old Madison would have hung up. The old Madison would have screamed. But this Madison takes a deep breath. She forces a smile that the customer cannot see but that changes the tone of her voice. She solves the problem. She types the notes. She moves to the next call. I lean back in my leather chair. A strange feeling washes over me. It is not triumph. I do not feel a surge of victory watching my children struggle to earn a wage that I used to give them as an allowance. I feel relief. I feel the quiet satisfaction of a gardener who finally pruned the dead branches so the tree could live. They are tired. They are broke and they are humbled. But they are more alive today than they ever were when they were suffocating under the weight of my money. I turn my attention to the document on my desk. It is a thick stack of paper bound in leather. Rick prepared it yesterday. It is the charter for the Caldwell Foundation. I pick up my fountain pen, the same pen I used to sign the fake divorce papers at the gala. But this time my hand is steady. I am not leaving my fortune to Preston or Madison. I am not leaving it to be squandered on sports cars and trips to Cabo. I am leaving it to the world. This foundation will fund scholarships for trade schools. It will support drivers who get injured on the job. It will build libraries in the South Side neighborhoods where I grew up. As for my children, they have their inheritance. It is not in a bank account. It is in that warehouse. It is in that cubicle. I have left them a clause in the trust. As long as they work, as long as they show up on time and do the job, they will receive a salary, a fair salary, enough to rent a decent apartment, enough to buy groceries, enough to live with dignity, but not enough to live with arrogance. I sign the last page. Harrison J. Caldwell. The signature is bold. It is final. I close the folder. The weight is gone. The legacy is secure. I stand up and walk to the window. I look out at the skyline of the city I helped build. I see the trucks moving on the highway carrying the lifeblood of the economy. My trucks, driven by men and women who respect the name on the door. I put on my coat. I do not need a driver today. I want to walk. I want to feel the sun on my face. I walk out of the office past the secretary who smiles at me with genuine warmth. I walk down the hall past the photos of the company picnic, past the awards. I step into the elevator. When the doors open to the lobby, I see the statue of my father. He looks stern and bronze. I wink at him. We did it, Pop. We fixed it. I push through the revolving doors and step onto the sidewalk. The air is crisp. The noise of the city is a symphony. I take a deep breath. I am 70 years old. I live in a small apartment now closer to the water. I sold the mansion. It was too big, too full of ghosts. I drive my own car. I cook my own meals. And every Sunday my children come over for dinner. Not because they have to, not because they want money, but because they are hungry and I make a good pot roast. We do not talk much yet. The wounds are still healing. But last week, Preston looked me in the eye and said thank you. He did not say it for a check. He said it for the second chance. That was worth more than the $200 million. I start walking down the street, my head held high. I am not a victim of elder abuse. I am not a sad story. I am a survivor. I am a father who loved his family enough to let them fall so they could learn how to stand. Family is a word we use too loosely. We think it means unconditional surrender. We think it means letting people hurt us because we share the same DNA. But I learned the truth. Family is not about blood. Family is about respect. Family is about who stands by you when the rain starts falling, not just who drinks your champagne when the sun is shining. I had to destroy the illusion of my family to save the people inside it. It was the hardest thing I ever did. But looking at Preston on that dock, looking at Madison in that chair, I know I made the right choice. If you are listening to this and you feel that knot in your stomach when your phone rings, if you feel like you are an ATM machine for people who claim to love you, if you are afraid to say no because you think you will be alone, listen to me. Stand up, close the wallet, open the door. Do not wait until you are 70 years old to demand respect. Do not wait until they try to lock you away. You have the power. You always had the power. It is better to walk alone in the light than to sit in the dark with people who are only waiting for your light to go out. I am Harrison Caldwell, and for the first time in my life, I am truly a rich man. The biggest lesson I learned is that enabling is not loving. For years, I thought I was being a good father by shielding my children from the consequences of their actions. I thought money could buy their happiness and their loyalty. I was wrong. By removing their struggles, I removed their character. I turned them into monsters. True love is having the courage to say no. It is having the strength to let them fail so they can learn to succeed on their own merits. Dignity cannot be bought. It must be earned. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about standing up for yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to practice tough love to save a relationship? I will see you in the next video.